Okay, all good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barb. I think Gordon should be joining us pretty soon. Since we have quorum, I would like to call this meeting to order. Before we begin our usual check-in, I wanted to reground us and recenter us in some protocols for our meetings. I think I shared in the end of the past meeting, and unfortunately I was not able to join with the camera, that I'm not someone that it's known for following a lot of rules. However, I find it to be really important for us to hold some agreements around how we are showing up in our meetings, in particular this meeting. One most important is that we are here to serve our community. And so because of that, we should show up in ways that our communication is clear, and that we are grounding the charge of this committee, which is to ensure that we're centering young people's voice, and to ensure that our community is participating in this conversation alongside with us. With that said, I wanted to be really specifically on some of the things that I noticed in the last meeting, which was I did not hear our young people talking much. I heard a lot of adults. I heard a lot of adults talking in the same time as another adults were talking, and that did not feel in alignment to our charge. Definitely not feel an example to how we wanted to show up to young people. I'm not expecting all the adults in the space to show up perfectly every time, but I do want us to hold in consideration and be mindful and intentional on how we interact with each other. So thank you very much for everybody that participated in the conversation last 2 weeks ago. If you have not, Barb sent you all a link. It was a really, really important conversation. I'm really appreciative that Tim joined us and got a chance to speak on the protocols. For this meeting, we have invited Kristen and a longtime colleague, former colleague Gina, to join us. And because we wanted to have this meeting be so accessible to our community and also to young people, we don't want to replicate a lot of other committee meetings, meaning we want to be tight with this meeting. We hope that this meeting will last an hour and 30 minutes tops, to make sure that folks are attentive and to make sure that, again, the information is accessible. It's not to say that in an hour and a half, we're gonna figure out everything that Kristen and Gina and Tim are sharing with us. We're not gonna be able to solve all the problems around wellness and safety in our district in the next hour and 15 minutes. And so there's much more. So we know that at the end of the meeting, we're still got more work to do, but it begins to feel less productive, and definitely is too much to expect everyone to be attentive and responsive and functional for long meetings. We intentionally asked all the presenters, I want to call presenters, I want to call them guests to our committee, to particular adults, all the adults, to be sharp, brief, direct in their remarks, so we can have an opportunity to hear from specifically young people and how they are receiving this message. I want to give an opportunity to my amazing co-chair, Gordon to see if there's anything to add. But before I do that, I wanted to share one last thing before we get into our next agenda item. There is a function on your Zoom that you can raise a virtual hand. You can also raise your real hand. Either of those hands would make it very helpful for Gordon and I to support a well-facilitated and responsive meeting. So we appreciate that if we continue to use that. If folks have other ways to engage, please let us know. Gordon, what else would you add to this grounding?
I think you covered pretty much all of it. Thank you, Ananda.
Barb, anything else from your end?
Oh, all good. Thank you.
Great. Gordon, would you like to get us started on item 2?
Yep. So now just I'll go around and just say one thing that we hope to get out of this meeting today. I can start. I would just hope just to learn more about what the district is doing to ensure our safety in schools. I'll pass it on to Joanna.
I'm so sorry, my audio cut out. Can you repeat that, please? Sorry about that.
No problem. Just one thing that you hope to get out of the meeting today.
To learn more about the protocols and I guess like the crisis response and everything, just to see like where communications and that differ and where they collide as well, just to come up with some solutions. And I'll take Lavinia.
I'm hoping to understand more of like the policies and what the upcoming school year is going to look like and actually understanding it. I'll pass it on to Mia.
I just want to learn more about how everything works, basically. I'll go to Ruben.
I'm sorry, was that me, Mia? Oh, sorry, everybody. I can hear my dogs in the background digging a hole in the floor. My goal for this meeting is to I wasn't here in the last meeting, just want to catch up and understand how next year is going to be better. So I think that's all our goal for this whole set of meetings. And I'll pass it on to, are we going to do the guests, Ananda? Sure. Kristen?
Hello, everybody. I'm just really grateful to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really looking forward to spotlighting some of the great work our schools do around mental health and really hear some youth voice about questions and wonderings about next steps. So thank you for the opportunity. I see Andre, I think, is next.
Thank you. Kind of echoing what some other folks have said, just getting more information on the processes and protocols on where they coincide and intersect with the communications and the other pieces. So looking forward to getting that information. And I will pass it on to Jessica.
I was going to say exactly what Ruben said. I want to know how we're going to do better this year, how this year is going to be a better year. Mia, did you go? Okay. Gina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gina Agulia, she, her, hers. I am happy to be here as well to just provide any information that I can and answer any questions, but also I just really appreciate, Ananda, you reminding us to just uplift student voice and youth voice. So I'm also going to be minding myself to make sure that that's being honored in this space. I'll pass it to Tim.
Looking at learning and continuing to grow and getting better. I'll pass it, who's left? Dr. Hicks.
I'm just looking to hear from those who have been invited to this space and really ascertain feedback and voices from our youth.
Rebecca just joined.
I think I was the last one.
I think Rebecca just joined, Angie.
Oh, okay.
And Leah too.
I can go while we wait for Rebecca. I don't see her now. I'm Leah Esser, she, her, hers. I am the Executive Director of Student and Staff Supports, and I'm grateful to be here in space with you all today. I am actually like triple booked, so I'm gonna just be really honest that I am gonna turn my camera off and be listening, but I will be available to jump in if there's something that Gina and Kristen need, but they truly are the experts in this world, but I just couldn't miss the party. So thank you for letting me be in your space, but also be doing a couple other meetings at the same time. So thank you so much. Have a lovely meeting, and I'm gonna go off camera now, but thank you, thank you.
I think Rebecca's back in.
I still don't see her.
Okay, I'm gonna try one more time.
I haven't gone yet.
Yeah, go ahead, Mari.
Yep. I just look forward to listening and learning and maybe helping determine what things can be changed and what things can't.
Thank you. And Rebecca, oh, sorry, Mari, interrupt.
No, I was just gonna say I was gonna pass it to Rebecca when she's ready.
And Rebecca, the prompt is what we're looking forward to learn or to engage in today's meeting.
For me, would be what progress has been made from the previous Safety and Wellness Committee that had recommendations that were very similar, or suggestions that were very similar to our discussions.
Great, thank you so much, Rebecca. And just a couple things that I forgot to mention. Well, first, thank you all for being here. I'm also really looking forward to the brief presentation from folks here, and then also to really engage in some meaningful conversations with our students. If you haven't done yet, which is sometimes it happens, there are quite a few materials on our board docs. We have asked folks that are presenting to put the information in there, and that can be served as a background, context, and also follow up. Like I said before, I just wanted to repeat for folks that were not present, there's way more conversation to be had with than what our time will allow today, and we're just going to have to accept that there will be no closure at the time of our end of our meeting, and we're just going to continue the conversation because I know that you all care a lot about this. So with that, Gordon, do you want to move to item number 3? Gordon, I don't know if you are, screen seemed to be frozen. So why don't we just entertain a motion to approve minutes dated July 28th, 2022. And I'll need a second. Moved by Ruben, second by Andre. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? Oh, sorry, Megan, did you have your hand up? Okay.
No, sorry, I was just voting in favor of the
Oh,
motion.
yes, thank you. I did say that. Right, it's confusing to me. Minutes approved.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Gordon. We can't hear you.
Thank you. So for the next agenda item is, the mental health and wellness discussion. I I believe we have some guest speakers who will do a brief presentation on that.
Should I jump on in?
I'm sorry, Kristen, do you want me to share the slides?
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. So thank you so much for the invitation. I'm Kristen Gachow. I'm the mental health coordinator for the district. This is, I think I calculated my 25th year working for MMSD, working as a school psychologist at the middle, elementary, and high school level. I see Ms. Hotz here from my East days. It's so fun to see these connections. So I just love being in this role to really have an opportunity to highlight for you all the amazing work that our school staff do every day. And we really, this was a presentation that was based briefly on a presentation that Gina and Leah and I created to share with the school board, because really this work happens across the district. And so while I'm here representing this work and Gina's here representing this work, we're representing work that happens in multiple departments and of course embedded in our schools every day. There are a number of slides here which you have access to. I'm going to work on being as brief as I can so that we can have most time for conversation. But I do think it helps a little bit if we can spend a little bit of time sharing a little bit of the framework and the philosophy from where we're headed from, so that my answers to your questions make a little more sense. I also did my homework and really listened to your last few meetings. So I really created this presentation based on some of the questions I was hearing pop up already. So hopefully some of your questions will catch from the beginning and others will come up, right? We just know that that's how, you know, that with one question answered, another one will join. And that's just going to be, you know, part how we'll engage in this work. So next slide, Barb. So, you know, overall today, you know, it's an interesting thing to come and talk about mental health to a committee that's working on sort of safety and well-being, right? Because that is certainly one important element to our work. And it's one of many elements that all come together. And we all know that, right? We can talk anything from like safety glass to protocols to how we build relationships, right? You all have taken on a very broad topic. But mental health and mental well-being is part of this because we want to create a sense of psychological safety for all of our students and all of our staff. So thank you again for the invitation and for me to be able to highlight some of the work that we've been doing across the district. Okay, next slide. This is becoming one of my favorite slides, is that I think that right now it's really easy to think about mental health in the sound bites we're hearing from the media, right? Which is all kind of like scary and doomsday kind of conversation. And I think it's really nice to spend a little bit of time, and Jill Underly, our current state superintendent, framed it beautifully for us in the Wisconsin School Mental Health Framework, to saying a key aspect of thinking about school-based mental health is approaching mental health as an asset that can be developed in schools rather than a problem that needs to be addressed. So often the message right now is overlooking the resiliency that our young people have and our whole community has, frankly. And it's easy to do that when we're all under stress, right? It's easy to see where the places of challenge are. Boy, there's a lot of days that's where I'm living, is to see the places of challenge. And we've had an opportunity as a community to come through something together, and we've all come through. We're not, I want to say we're all the way through it, right? But we've built some skills and some strengths along the way, and I want to really note those and highlight those as well. Next slide. So one of the things that we're really working on is messaging that that everyone has mental health. We are not sort of pointing our fingers at a handful of people that are experiencing some challenges, right? And there's a wide range of how any of us in any one day are experiencing our own mental health and well-being. And again, I just want to really point to the resilience and strength that we have in our community. And of course, we want people to be building skills in schools. And this is something that I strongly believe can be taught, just like algebra. And we can practice these skills. And as adults in this community, we can model how we, you know, not only can we teach it, but we can model how we're using these skills. And so schools are a unique place to be able to kind of keep molding and growing these skills. And we're also not the only place. We're one element in a larger community that's taking care of folks in our community in a collective way. Next slide. So this is the visual of what I mentioned, that there's multiple departments doing this work. It's really great that both Gina and I were invited tonight on the same night, because both within my department, which is the Department of Student and Staff Support, and Gina's department in the Office of School Safety, we really work together to create a unified approach to make sure that we're thinking about supporting the mental health of our students. Next slide. So it's always good to go back a little bit to what our youth are telling us. There's a big assessment that happens in Dane County called the Dane County Youth Assessment. This was data from some of our high schools. It's done at both middle and the high schools every couple years. This was from last year. And we know that some of these trends were spiked because it was during COVID. And we also know that some of these trends have been rising over the years, regardless. Even pre-COVID, we were seeing some rising rates of anxiety, some rising rates of depression. And, you know, it's interesting when you ask some of our students about where their points of anxiety were, it was around COVID-related things like being worried that they couldn't talk to their parents or their teachers about the things they were stressed about because the adults in their lives were stressed, right? Being worried that they were falling behind in school because of COVID. So, you know, we've had some increase in some challenges that, you know, we've noticed both here in Madison and Dane County, as well as across the country. And there's some unique things that we're hearing our youth say about the why and the how, about what's happening as they're working through coping through what have been, you know, really challenging times. I also want to mention that besides COVID, we're also really increased our awareness around racial disparities and other, you know, really multiple people talk about this as a multiple layers of a pandemic. Nothing new there, but our awareness was really raised, and some of those disparities were really in front of folks in ways that they hadn't before. And so I want to just name that too. There's, you know, it's easy to point to one stressor in our families' lives, but there's multiple that we're really dealing with at this point in time. Okay, next slide. So I brought this one because, you know, one of our goals is in MMSD is to really support student learning, right? And it's really important that in order for us to learn, we have to feel safe, right? So that's when we're talking about there's physical safety, right? My daughter used to talk about those, you know, fire drills. One time she ran out in the snow without her shoes on because she was like all worried about getting outside for her fire drill. So like we train for that. And so, but we really have to like tend to all layers of safety. There's like the physical safety and the emotional safety. And in order to be able to get into that, like how can I learn from things in that prefrontal part of your brain, you have to make sure that people are feeling safe and seen. So we have to tend to the whole person in order to meet our overall goal as a school district. Next slide. So there's a lot of research out there about how people feel safe in a school. And I start to say students here, but really it's us as a community, it's adults as well. And so this has been something that I pulled out. I actually pulled this out when I had a conversation with Mike Jones the other day. Because whenever I start to think about like, what is our next move? It actually comes down to some of these pretty core principles, is how do people stay connected? How do they stay regulated? Where can we find a sense of hope? And then of course, safety is the undergirding of all of that. So whenever I start to think this is really complex, it's like, it's actually really simple. So this is a good place to start if we can't really figure out where we're headed next. Next slide. I could talk about this for hours. I'm not going to, but there are a lot of things that our school district has offered on behalf of our staff and students for a very long time. We have tremendously talented individuals who are doing tremendous work with our student service teams, our psychologists, our social workers, our counselors, our nurses. And, you know, we've other people that, you know, are deliberately working on supporting a positive school climate and culture. And I also just want to highlight, you know, the relationships that every single one of our school-based folks do every single day, right? That is all supporting the mental health and well-being of our students, all those interactions and high expectations. The other thing that for those of you that aren't familiar with this is that this is a triangle that comes out of public health world to really talk about that what we need to have for our students to build a foundation of from the bottom is like things that are available for all, right? Like that's creating a safe environment for everybody, building community, teaching some of those universal, teaching to everybody types of skills. Students, you might remember somewhere along the line where you've had lessons about learning about how to solve a problem or what happens if you're bullied, right? Sometimes along the line, you've had some of those conversations with your teachers and some of that teaching. Some students need something a little bit more than that. And that often is like group interventions. So some of our students get invited to do a group related to depression or a group related to anxiety. And we also do some universal screening there. So we ask all of our students at a grade level about questions about depression or about trauma exposure. And then we work to make sure we get them connected to the right type of supports from that universal screening. And lastly, we have what we think about as our more intensive interventions, which is often a referral to individual supports in school or out. And often when people think about mental health supports, that's all they think about, right? They think about seeing a counselor or, that intensive level. And that's important, but really that's flipping the triangle over. We really need, especially when we've all gone through such universal times of stress, we need to push down into that triangle. We need to make sure that those supports are available to everybody versus that we're trying to catch one person at a time and meet their individual needs. That's important too, but that's only one piece of the larger puzzle. All right, Barb, next slide. There's lots of ways we think about how to do this work. And I just wanted to talk about this, that we really have to create a structure that supports this no matter what state we're in, right? We're right now having gone through a stressful time with COVID, but no matter what, there's going to be something next that we're going to be managing as a school community or as a citywide or countywide community. And so these are just some of the things that happen in schools in a way that support the work of our great student services staff. One of the things that I really heard folks say on this call was that we don't know how to connect to our student service folks. We don't know where to get help. That has been something that I've been hearing across the state for the last few years. And I'm happy to say we were a leadership team yesterday, and we have a mental health literacy slide deck that is going out to all staff this year so that they're being able to increase their mental health literacy. So all school staff are going to be have the tools in their pocket to recognize when students are needing more. And then really asking our schools to share with them, and then also their students and their school community, their families, how do you connect to our student service team members? If you need something more, how do you do that? And I reminded folks, I know a lot of our schools do this really well in the fall. But what does it take to remind people over and over? I said, I don't know about you, but my brain is not catching on to all the details lately. So sometimes what we think we've done, we did a presentation once to our students, we probably need to do it again. So that is a real push that I have this year that I really also heard mentioned in prior meetings. And I just want to mention that that's something that we're really working on. Something that I'm kind of proud of, if any of you like kind of popping into different links, is that the U.S. Surgeon General advisory report really had a comprehensive report about how to manage the youth mental health. I think they used the word crisis. They said they used a pretty strong word about what was happening for our youth around mental health. And the school, I just wanted to note that most of the recommendations, actually all of the recommendations in that are definitely part of our framing that we've had for quite a long time. So what we've been building over the years in MMSD is very aligned to both sort of state and national standards and expectations. So I think that we've got some really great resources and scaffolding to build with. There's plenty of work we still need to do. I'm not saying we've got it all going. And I think we've got some good structure and good framework to keep building on. Next slide. So this is a little bit was embedded in the triangle, but there's a number of different places that we really look to leverage our resources around mental health. And when people were asking, like, where is our money going? How are we setting this up? There's a number of different places where that are key to us really providing strong services for our students. One is our student service team. Those are the staff in schools. There was some questions. Actually, I've got a slide here. We've been working to increase the numbers of those staff. So I've got a slide in a minute to talk about that. We have kind of what we might call our culture and climate team, where people are really building safe communities and bringing in social emotional learning, creating belonging, creating safety, teaching skills through things like our welcoming schools. What do I want to call it? Our welcoming schools approach, right? And the skills attached to that. And then we do have community partners that come in and support this work as well. So sometimes that's easy to think about the community partnership and not think about all the other pieces, because that is sort of like a program or something that can be pointed to, but that always fits in the larger arena that we've been building with our in-school staff. And it's sort of one element of our larger approach to support mental health. Okay, next slide. And I'm reaching the end here for those of you who are getting ready with some questions. I heard some questions about, how are we supporting our schools? We did increase our social work allocation significantly this year. They were the farthest behind the national recommended ratios, is why we started there. So we are really working on that. I think you've talked a little bit in this group that the money that's come in to support mental health has been really tricky to know how to spend well, to make sure that it gets as directly supportive of our students and our school staff as possible, because it's short term, or it's grant writing, for a very specific kind of narrow thing. And then if that doesn't really fit into our overall approach, that actually gets distracting, right? So if we're like kind of writing for something that's just kind of short term and very specific, it can actually pull staff's attention away from this other like good foundational work that we've been working on. And sometimes I think can cause more harm than good, even though it looks like it's money and it's exciting, right? So that's always the balance that we're working on with this. Next slide. So I mentioned that partners are one of the elements that we have in our support of our student mental health. I raised this because I know that's been a question. That has been a big part of my work since I came on as the mental health coordinator, is really working to build and support these longer term partnerships. Some of these partnerships we've had multiple years, and others are new and or we're trying to formalize them. Some of them have been informal for a while, and we're working to make them more formal. I'm really finding that the more we spend time working on this and talk with partners about what they're bringing to the table, what schools' needs are, what schools are able to do to support that partnership, what school district level folks are able to do that partnership, we're really building stronger partnerships that are going to be able to provide better, stronger services for our students. So that is a lot of the work that I'm doing. We have some exciting new partnerships happening. And like I said, I think it's also important to keep nurturing the ones that have been around for a while we're also looking for, what's new in the horizon. Next slide. So we definitely, for partnerships, I think that I think what I can say about this slide is that it takes time and attention. There can be some real barriers to bringing partners in. We're working on different kinds of ethical systems with HIPAA and FERPA. We have to think about permission and confidentiality. We have to make sure that they're not creating silos, and they're a really important key part of our work. So that's just a balance that we're working on anytime we're bringing in a school partner. Next slide. So a few priorities that I'm really working from this year, really to build that infrastructure in our schools so that our student service team members are doing the work that they are so highly trained to do, right? That our school psychologists, school social workers, counselors, nurses are really tending to the mental health and well-being needs of our students and staying just hyper focused on that primary responsibility. really making sure that we're creating those strong referral pathways, so both within school and outside of school. One thing that I'm super proud of this year is that we brought on a bilingual mental health navigator, so to really help our students and our families and our schools to really tend to some of the needs, to make sure that we're just paving the way to get students connected to the services that they need. Really working on that universal social emotional screening, so that we're checking in with our students at least once per grade level. By grade level, I mean grade band, by elementary, middle, and high school. Really thinking about what does it mean to be offering high quality, culturally responsive interventions and partnerships. We have a very white student service staff, and we have a very diverse student body. And so how are we making sure we're tending to what our students and families need in ways that's being responsive to who they are as humans, and how what their needs are versus our historical, our mental health approach nationwide has been very white centered historically. And so how do we kind of work to shift that narrative? I'm very excited that we're working to build a school-based health center model at each of our high schools. We're starting with our four traditional high schools, bringing on a 1.0 therapist at each of those in this coming year, with the idea of building both physical and mental health services within that model. It's a national model that's just fabulous. I can't wait to talk to you more about that someday. But we're working on really building that model. And then really thinking about how do we push down into that universal teaching, right? We can be real easy to think about those partnerships or those one-on-one therapy needs, but how do we make sure that we're creating a place of emotional safety for everybody? And really healing happens in relationships and community. So we've got to figure out how we're tending to that as we move forward. All right, I think that's either it or close. Thank you for letting me give you a lot of information in a short time. But I definitely feel like, thank you for indulging me in that. I feel like my answers to your questions will make more sense having that foundation.
Thank you so much, Kristen. And thank you for also watching previous videos, because this group has talked and had lots of extensive questions around what are some of the investments that we're doing that has changed. And I really appreciate that slide that shows what are the national recommendations, where we have been. And I'm so pleased to hear that we have almost closed that gap that, to me in particular in 2022, feels extremely important. Gordon, would you like to facilitate the conversations and the questions, or would you like me?
Yeah, I can do it.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions?
And I should mention real quick too that we've got Rebecca here, who's part of our mental health team. So Rebecca might actually be someone that'll want to hop on and be part of answering some of this too, because she's doing this work on the ground as part of our Great Building Bridges team. So put you on the spot, Rebecca, from the beginning. All right, sorry, go ahead.
Lavinia.
Do you have specific examples of how our partnerships have helped students in the past?
Yeah, that's a great example. Let me think of where I want to highlight. One of the partnerships that I really like is that we've got something called Face Kids, where it used to be called 5 agency collaboration, but now there's more like 10 agencies, where we had, as a county, we realized that there's a lot of agencies out in the community that wanted to figure out how to best support youth. And so they came together, and it's a hub run by Catholic Charities, but includes multiple other agencies, a Grace that does grief groups, Lutheran Social Services, Anesis, Journey Mental Health. So many of our folks that support youth mental health all come together. And a school can say, we need a group that's going to do this, stress and coping, or We have a grief group, and they put a request in and they send out a therapist to do a group with one of our student service team members. So I just think it's such an amazing model because students then have access to the expertise of that therapist, and they have their student service team person who's their like key support at school, really providing these groups that are targeted to what the needs are that are bubbling up at the school at the time. So I think that's just one great example of one of our partnerships. Another partnership that's near and dear to me is our Behavior Health in Schools program. We have in 12 of our elementary and middle schools a half-time therapist that comes in and sees students at school when they have barriers to getting a therapist out in the community. So very complex partnership. But we're really offering a lot of supports to families who, it's not easy getting your student out to see a therapist for 1,000 different reasons. Sometimes insurance, sometimes transportation, sometimes people have had a bad experience in the past and it actually feels better or safer to do it at school. For others, they don't want to do that work at school. They want to do it somewhere else, right? So trying to meet the needs of the families. Was it Lavinia? Was that who asked the question?
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question if you don't mind to that. So, all of those resources, like you said, with, extra therapy outside of MSD with your partners, who recommends that to the student? Would they have to find a resource on their own, or do they go to the school psychologist or social worker?
That is such a great question, Gordon. And when I said that's part of the work that we have to do about our referral pathway, that is definitely part of the work that we need to do, is to really educate our whole school community, teachers, students, and families about, if you feel like you need something, here's the way to reach. I talked to our web designers the other day and said, I've worked for this district for 25 years and I have a really hard time figuring out who is the school psychologist at any one school, right? So we need to do a better job of using all of our resources to make it super easy for a family to say, I have a worry about my student, or a student to say, I have a worry about myself, and to be able to click in and find who those people are. Gordon, when I worked at East, I used to go into health classes and really make sure that people knew my face. And we did a lot of connections that way. So some of it is, just getting, our student service folks out there. And then the other way that happens, Gordon, is sometimes it's sort of self or parent. Often it was another student. They'd bring someone in and be like, Miss Kristen, you need to see, Gordon today, right? So that was another way that would happen. But the other way that we do this is we do universal screening at second, third, or fourth, sixth, and usually 9th or 10th grade, where we really ask students about how they're doing. And then that is important, but what's really important is that we do follow-up interviews for any students that are saying things aren't great for them. And that was a great way to get connected to, sometimes it's just that that you've got an advocate in your corner, right? It doesn't even necessarily mean you need something more than that. Or sometimes I'll find out that the student's already got an outside therapist, and it'd be really helpful for school with family permission to know what they're working on so I can better support them at school. But Gordon, I think that we need to that's a big part of our work, is to figure out how we do a better job advertising the great work that people do, and how to make sure people can access it no matter, through multiple points of access.
Thank you.
Of course.
Lavinia, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I just have a follow-up question. I know you were talking about it just now, and I think we can all agree that it's been hard for students to find resources at schools to help them. So I'm wondering if you guys have ways to overcome that for the upcoming school year. Do you have any plans to make these services more known among the students?
Yeah, I mean, literally just yesterday, I talked to leaders in every single one of our school buildings and asked them to do just that. So there's some things that I think we can do at the district level, but I also think that there's a lot that needs to happen school by school, because you know your school best, right? I think that down the road, we also need to get student voice on that, because I'm not going to be the one that's going to solve that problem. So I can have a few ideas to kind of work around the edges, but I think that that's something that we should really, a couple of years ago, we did a lot of work with Student Senate. And I think that, you know, as my team, you know, we were a little bit off kilter all last year, just like the rest of you, right? We were out subbing and doing other things. And so I think that that is exactly where our next work needs to be. And I think that this is the exact place where student voice is going to be really important, because you all know best about how to get this message out.
I was just going to add to that too, Lavinia, that if you all have any ideas, we would love to hear them. One idea that I know La Follette High School is doing is they actually have a QR code on a little piece of, or on a flyer around their school, that you can scan the QR code and select who you want to meet with from student services. So I don't know if that's silly or that's awesome from a student perspective, but those are the kinds of things we'd love to know, to those, is that legit? Does that really work? Is that something you're interested in?
Thank you, you too, Megan.
So one of the most pressing concerns that I kind of hear from my peers is the hesitancy to see a counselor or psychologist because they're worried about their privacy being compromised. And I know that you mentioned kind of the addition or more stress on HIPAA. So could you please elaborate a little bit more on that?
Megan, I'm going to repeat your question to see if I'm catching it correctly. So the question is that if a student goes in to see a student services person, like a school psychologist, will their privacy be maintained by seeing that person? Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, that's my question. How do you also kind of overcome that hesitation with students?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's so interesting because that is such a common question about what the stigma is of seeing student service folks at school. And while I know that exists, I also feel like any school that I've worked at, in general, it just became part of the culture that we were all just part of the work of, part of the culture of the school. And I don't want to diminish that concern about privacy and confidentiality by any means. So I do think there's a lot that we can do around mental health literacy so that everyone just is aware of the resources, just work on reducing stigma in general, and really talking about exactly this question about where are the places that we can keep information private and where we can't. I think our student service team members are pretty good at talking with students about that there are some limitations to confidentiality, right? If we're worried about the safety of a student, we do have to go against sort of just strict privacy, strict confidentiality. But other than that, there really is, students can be asked to, can be expected that what they say in that space is private, unless we're worried about safety. I always tried, and I'm coming at it from thinking about the high school perspective, right? But I did some level of this, and no matter what grade, is that, building that relationship, we work on some of that together. So, really work on that idea about if we do need to talk to somebody, how we go about doing that together, and giving some choice where it exists. So I appreciate the worry, and we definitely are working under some laws that students need to be aware of walking in, and that's part of building that trust so that they know exactly what they're can expect out of that time and that support.
Okay, thank you so much.
Just a quick question. So for the RJ coordinators, in middle school, I would say there was a lot more restorative justice work that I've noticed being present. We used to have a lot of circles, and there was a lot more presentations or what restorative justice is. But coming into high school, that type of exposure is very limited. So what do you have to say about going forth on how we can incorporate restorative justice more so in a high school setting? And 1 second. And then after this, we're going to go to Ruben, and then I'll pass it on to Ananda to discuss the next item.
Yeah, I think the RJ coordinators and how we're using them is a super great question. And I would say it is not my area of expertise. Gina, I don't know if you have more that you want to add. I've been in some conversations lately where I know that there are a group of people who are really meeting to think about how to best implement RJ in general, and with the RJ coordinators specifically. So I think your question is a great one, and I don't know, Gordon, that I'm exactly the person to answer it. But we could certainly figure. Oh, Leah's here.
That's
All
why I said I
right.
was going to half listen so that I didn't leave you all hanging and have
Thank
to
you.
live in suspense until
I was
another
like, I'll
meeting.
invite someone to come answer that better than what I can.
Yeah, I'll give you a very brief sort of synopsis of my assessment there and what we're hoping to do for the future. We have been implementing restorative justice for, Ananda, you could probably tell me the exact number, over 10 years, probably closer to 12, in terms of like a formal sort of approach to RJ and thinking about RJ as part of our overall system. Our implementation of restorative justice looks very different at all of our schools. And what we lack, in my opinion, is a comprehensive, I'll just use roadmap for the purpose of the conversation of what it means to implement restorative justice. So thinking about what are the beliefs, values, and mindsets, and not just going straight to how do we respond to misbehavior. So really, really thinking about how we build systems and structures that work. We're doing restorative justice, but we're not living restorative justice consistently across the system. And the high school RJ coordinators, frankly, we can provide them with a lot more support, direction, and coordination between the groups to make sure that we're leveraging them, not just for their beautiful ability to deliver and engage and facilitate circle, but also their ability to really change a system and how we view kids and how we view schools. The RJ topic is a great one for a larger conversation, and I do think it would be one that might be interesting, Ananda and Gordon, to invite us back for. If you want to go further in depth with that. Absolutely. But we have some room to grow. And I'll just be really honest when I say that.
So Gordon, is it okay if Leah, to answer your question, 2009 was the first time we received a federal grant to.
Thank you. I knew it was something around there.
I got you. Well, how about we just get everyone's questions like as a lightning rod, and then we get whoever needs to be answered so we can have enough time for the next conversation. So so then Ruben, Lavinia, and Ms. Haas.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what a larger conversation is, so it'd be great to hear about what is needed for getting to that restorative justice model that you're thinking about. But my original question was, you talked about a few gaps between the standard and then what we're doing through your presentation, Kristen. And at the end of the presentation, does that sound familiar? Some of the gaps you were saying that, yeah, people are nodding their heads. I want to know what we're comparing ourselves to and what we would need to actually fill those gaps.
Thank you, Ruben. We put a pin on that. And Lavinia.
I was just wondering, have you, based on your experience with schools, have you seen an impact in students and in schools after like incorporating these mental health services, and how often are these services used?
Beautiful. Thank you, Jessica.
My question, or I guess comment, was related to the RJ stuff again too. I think one of the issues, and kind of comes back to something Kristen was saying, as far as just communication about what is there and what people can expect and stuff. And I don't think that's there universally. And I love the idea of something like a roadmap, like Leah said, just so that people knew, because most staff that I talk to don't know what's going on with RJ in their buildings. And that's not to say there isn't stuff, but we don't necessarily know how to help students access it. And we don't know whether, how it's working. We're all for it, but there's just a lack of understanding there, and there's a communication gap, I think, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Jessica, for what you're saying. I'm actually going to start with you just by saying one of the things that this committee has identifies our opportunity on internal, meaning communication central office to schools and communication out to the community around all the things, in particular the things that relate to this committee. I love the idea of us dedicating a meeting on RJ, and I'm also using a lot of self-restraint because I can talk about RJ all day long. And I want to give either Kristen or Leah like an opportunity to just maybe like use a minute and a half to just wrap like RJ, and then just know that I hope that one of you have written down some questions so we can actually start a meeting with just answering them. Does that feel fair? So we'd dedicate a good amount of time for that. Do any of you wanted to just talk briefly?
So I think that an invitation for the folks that are our RJ experts to come back is great, and I definitely wrote down some questions, and I think I love that idea of kind of starting to flesh out that roadmap and on where we're headed. I think that that is fabulous. And then as far as the gaps, I think if it was about our number of student service professionals, each year we've got a plan to kind of get closer to what the national standard is. So that is something that we've got kind of a multi-year plan mapped out. And this year we took a huge gain around social workers, and also those standards are changing. I was just talking to my colleagues in my school psychology world, and I said, how come your ratio is so much higher or lower, I don't know, whatever it is, than the others? And they're like, well, we're actually in conversation about that, right? So I think this is going to be a long-standing conversation, Ruben, about how we continue to build. I also can tell you that MMSD is much more highly staffed than a lot of our other communities statewide, and it doesn't feel that way day to day in the building, right? So I'll say that I'll say that as well. Like, we have some richness in our staffing levels, and I know we could continue to increase.
Is there a way to understand what the goals are and how close we are to them as a resident or as a city professional? I mean, anyway.
Yeah, I know that we had that mapped out. My colleague Sarah Kenevi had really worked on that, and I don't have that at my fingertips, but I could see what I could do to find that map and see about getting that back to you all. But I don't have it right, like to pop up right this minute. And then the question about sort of impact. Our mental health programs are one of the most highly studied programs in the district. We collect a lot of data. We have a lot of numbers of students that access these programs, and they many of them have what we can find as like significant effects. For example, our bounce back program, when our third graders are being taught about how to manage tough times in their world, their symptoms of trauma are significantly reduced by the end of a 8-week group. So we do study this quite thoughtfully. And so I do have some confidence that we're making a difference. And I don't have like a total number of students to give you, but I do know that there's we do reach quite a few students in our formal programs. And then if you add the informal programs where there's other connections made either in school or to, referrals to outside community agencies and things like that, it's much even larger than just sort of the numbers that are in a group, right? Yeah. So.
Thank you so much, Kristen. And if there's anything that either you or Leah would like to just follow up with the group, please send whatever information you like to Barb, and Barb can share with all of us. Let's officially close this part. Thank you so much again for sharing. Thank you for also being really concise with a lot of information. I really appreciate that. I think I just wanted to highlight something that made me think, and something that has been my own growth around sharing leadership with young people, is that they, once when we give them that space, they really show up. And I know many of you know that already through your own practices. My recommendation to you all's team is, having some internship not just having like a transaction with student senate, but maybe an internship that can be either paid with stipend or something that students can get credit that they could potentially apply at the higher education level. So I don't want to lose that thought. Gordon, I'll pass it to you to introduce our next presenter.
Thank you all for the discussion. It's very productive. Let's move on to the next presentation on safety and security.
All right. Barb, are you gonna show this slide?
Coming up, 1 second.
Great. And I too have a lot of content, and I'm trying to make sure that I just provide an overview, but that just please know that we can definitely go deeper as needed.
Gina, do you mind starting by sharing your title at the district and function?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Why don't you just go right to the next slide. So my name is Gina Gachow. I am a co-director in the Office of School Safety with Cedric Morris. Cedric Morris's title is Director of Safety and Security, and my title is Director of Cross Systems and Critical Response. And I want to take a step back just to share a little bit about the transition into this office. This office was new as of 2021. So last year was both Cedric and my first year in these roles. My background is in school social work and in clinical social work. So I have an LCSW and a school social work license. I also have a lot of experience and focus on like crisis response. I've worked with our Journey Mental Health Crisis Unit. So doing acute mental health crisis support for youth and adults. And I came into the Office of School Safety from the Office of Student and Staff Support, or the Department of Student and Staff Support. So you just heard from Kristen and Leah, and those were, well, they still are my colleagues, but I was very much a part of that office doing in my social work role. The intentionality behind moving from a safety and security perspective to an Office of School Safety was really important, because we really wanted to emphasize the importance of psychological and social emotional safety, as well as physical safety and safety of infrastructure, technology, and that type of stuff. And we know that that both are so interconnected. And so my role being much more rooted in mental health and acute mental health crisis response, coming into this office was to really balance out the other aspects of safety that often are what you are thinking about more when you're thinking of safety and security. So if you want to go to the next slide. So just providing you all with a bit of an overview. What is our office? So it is, like I said, new. It is a 2-person office. We are under the supervision of Ennis Harvey, who is the Associate Superintendent of High Schools. And what we focus on, Kristen actually showed this slide to you before, but we really look at the model that comes from FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And they have a preparedness model that really looks at the different cycles of critical response. And it starts with prevention and mitigation, and then preparedness, response, and recovery. And so we use that, but we put our school-based lens on that model, and we really think about how are we planning, training, organizing, supporting, evaluating, and restoring in situations in collaboration with school principals in their team to do these pieces of what FEMA talks about it in their emergency response cycle. So we take the federal, kind of standard, and we really apply it to our work in the schools that really encompasses setting up a really positive and welcoming culture so that when critical incidents do happen, we can repair harm that's been caused, we can handle them with care, and then we can build back in because we have that established welcoming and safe culture. And then, kind of using both cycles to impact the work that we do. And the next slide. And that's just the two different cycles I was just talking about. Sorry about that. I didn't know if those had made it into the slides. But again, using the cycle on the right to and then influencing with the cycle on the left. Next slide. I kind of already went over this, and so I don't want to go too deep into it, but these are just some more specific information about what Cedric and I do that's different. So Cedric is, and he could not be here today, but he's focused on providing coaching and consultation for the school security assistants. He oversees traffic and transportation safety. He helps with camera access and making sure they're working properly, and then working with building services on building related safety needs. And then next slide is my job, which is partly grant funded. And what my job is responsible for is providing that professional development, coaching, and consultation for school-based critical response teams in K through 12. And that provides additional training in some things like threat assessment, early intervention to access school violence, and acute mental health crisis intervention. This is my responsibility is also coordinating that grant, because that part of my work is grant funded. I'm also working with principals and school teams on helping youth navigate the justice system. We can talk a lot more about that, but our number one is to divert youth away from the justice system. We truly believe that when situations happen, the majority of the time we can handle things at a school-based level, because our schools are the ones that know their students, their staff, their families, their buildings the best. And so we don't necessarily feel that we need to be involving other outside agencies unless the situation is imminent. And so really trying to focus on a system that's diverting youth away from those systems that we know are inherently racist and detrimental, as is the school system. So, lots of systems we're trying to dismantle or shift in this work. I also provide training and guidance for schools on mandatory reporting, threats of school violence, and sexual violence reporting. So that's another chunk of topics that I know could take a lot more time and attention that we just don't have today. And so that's a little bit more about what I do. And then for Cedric and I together in the next slide, we assist school principals with their safety plans. So we have school safety plans as well as a district safety plan. We have drills and procedures. We know that that's something that you want to learn a little bit more about. So we have that in here as well, but making sure they're done with fidelity and that any additional safety measures are taken when needed. We also are committed to supporting schools through critical incidents. And that can also involve helping liaison with our outside agencies like county, the police department, other emergency responders. We assess the level of threat and risk and then utilize our cross systems partners to respond to situations. And then we bring our district critical response team together to act as a unified command support to a school building in a time of critical response. Next slide. I say this a lot, is that critical response teams are critical. I said it once, but I'll say it again, that our staff in our buildings, our teachers, our custodians, the people that are there day in, day out, they are the ones that know our students best. And so it's incredibly important that we make sure that when we from central office are supporting them, that we are doing that in a way that's continuing to build their capacity. And we really want them to feel confident and capable of handling situations, and that we can come in and provide that layer of support. So that's really the mindset that we are wanting to come from, Cedric and I, as well as the rest of our district critical response team, really wanting to support the school in having the school really take the ownership and leadership of their situations, and then we can help support them. Next slide. As I said, we have the district critical response team. What's really important and intentional is that it's multidisciplinary. You, I'm sure, have heard that sometimes in our district, we end up working in silos or don't necessarily communicate the way that we should. But with a district critical response team, we really have different representatives from different areas of our district coming together. And that's intentional to really bring lots of different viewpoints, different ideas, different backgrounds, and areas of expertise. So we have representatives from student and staff support like Leah and Kristen that you met today, Office of School Safety like myself and Cedric, our building services, so that would be like building facilities, our communications department, Tim's here today, our legal department, the associate superintendent's office, and other liaisons to the superintendent. So really trying to bring a well-rounded team. And we know that when multiple viewpoints come together to support through a critical incident, it really is the best way to have successful outcomes for students. That is now, yep, perfect. Keep to the next one. Yep, that is then what we do come together to support our school-based teams. And our school-based teams are led by the principal, and they involve our student services staff and other support staff. They don't necessarily always have the opportunity to have teachers, because teachers are often in their rooms and working directly with students. And this is an opportunity for school-based teams to provide that support to a teacher, to a classroom, kind of be the behind the scenes. So that would be a lot of what you've heard from Kristen today. We really try to do a lot of proactive work first. So again, really setting up those really solid mental health practices, whether they're with our partners or with our school social workers, psychologists, counselors, nurses. We know that relationships are key. So the more that these individuals can build solid relationships with kids, that the better we are to then deal with a crisis. Again, if we have these really well-established relationships, if kids and staff are feeling safe, if they're feeling that sense of trust, then they are more able to, make work together in the event of a critical incident. We'd have our clerical staff, our custodial staff, and any other staff as needed could come in as part of a critical response team. It could vary from incident to incident. Who's best and most suited for coming together to come up with some next steps to provide support. And then, next slide. We also, like I said, work with our cross systems partners. We really, again, very intentionally choose when is needed or appropriate for us to be involving the police, fire department, EMS. We work with Dane County Emergency Management and Victim Services. I mentioned Journey Mental Health. They have their crisis unit, Dane County Department of Human Services. Andre's on this lovely committee. And then a whole bunch of other community agencies that many of you have heard a lot about, and I can't go into all of them, but we work a lot with cross systems partners to then next slide would be to really wrap around our students. So really focusing on how do we use our district critical response team, our school critical response team, our partners, and then families and community members to really provide that wraparound support for a student that's in crisis.
Gina, I know you're just getting into the juicy stuff. I just want to let you know the committee members had access already to the slides, and we are at the 6:30. And I want to give all the things you're sharing is things that people have been, I'm sure, a lot of questions. So is it okay to wrap up in like the next couple minutes? So
absolutely, yeah. Sorry about that. Thank you. Let's go ahead. The next slide you've already seen, and that's again just our connection to this Department of Student and Staff Support and how we really work well together. The slide after that, I won't go too into it, but I just want to make sure you all have access to this document. This really lays out what might happen when there's a call for support. And I think that it's really important that you all know that when a situation happens, these are the likely steps that could happen. I want so badly for everyone in our district to know and to be briefed on all the different ways that we might be providing support and what that looks like, so that when a situation does happen, that you can say, oh yeah, I know that this might happen or this might happen. They might come together this way. So that's a document I would love for you to take a deeper look at. If you go to the next slide, that is thinking a little bit more about our drills, and I know that there is a major importance on really thinking about how do we have more frequency of these drills, but also balance with the psychological impact that these drills can have, the background of trauma that these types of things can bring up. And so really, again, leveraging, making sure that we're practicing and that we're prepared with how are we really supporting the social, emotional, mental health of our students and staff through these situations, whether they're a drill or not, because it's really, really important that we hold both with such intentionality, that we want to be prepared and we want to be supporting mental health. The next slide would just be a little bit more about some of our trainings that we provide staff. We use the I Love You Guys Foundation, which is an all hazards approach. It is really intentional because the idea is to start training staff and students around how to respond to hazards instead of how to respond to specific situations. I use the example often of we do fire drills, but we don't necessarily have a lot of big fires in schools, but what we should be shifting is to that green evacuate, because there's lots of different reasons we might need to evacuate. So how can we start using and helping kids and staff with things like social acuity and awareness to understand when a hazard might present itself, and that we could use one of these responses to do that. And so again, shifting from a fire drill to an evacuation drill, because it can really support multiple different types of safety concerns. And then to keep going, also talking about what kids get as far as teaching the standard response protocol. Keep going. And then the completion of drills. We know that with COVID and with our shift into online learning, we haven't done lockdown drill in 2 years. You've received lessons on it. So teachers and students have received lessons, but we haven't gone through the drills. So we will be moving back into that this year. And we are working with principals on pre-planning and what it's going to look like to debrief after the drill. There's going to be advance notice, and this will be in partnership with our central office as well as with the police department, to make sure that we are really balancing that very delicate reminder that this is a very serious thing that we should practice, and it can bring up a lot of concerns that we need to validate that are very real in the world we're living in right now. Next, I think I'm almost done here. I'm not even going to go into that, and there's any more slides. I'm not sure. All right, great. So I don't even think we need to move into our district safety plan for now. I think that's something that we're continuing to work on, and that we'll make sure that that's available for you as soon as we have recommendations on it.
Thank you so much, Gina. At this point, we would like to ask folks from the committee members to turn your cameras on so that our community can see who's in the call. And also I wanted to do like a physical cue to see if we can expand this meeting to close to 7 o'clock or 5 to 7. Would that be okay for folks? So I know there were a lot of questions around this. I'm looking at young people. Thank you, Gordon, for the Mia, Lavinia, Joanna. Does that sound okay? All right. Any of the students would like to kick us off with questions? Yeah, Gordon, I'll pass it to you.
So I saw on a 17th slide about how frequent drills should be within a given school year. My question is, who enforces that to ensure that these drills are being carried out, across the district with the, with the same standard and et cetera?
Yeah, so it is a combination of our office along with the school principal. So there's a document that every single principal is responsible for, and that we also have access to, that has them filling out each time that they complete a drill. The evacuation drills need to be done once a month. Just so you know, last year, every single principal at every single school completed an evacuation drill every month. So so you probably remember, some of the times when you were very cold, freezing outside, but we did those evacuation drills even in, January and February. There's a shelter, which is equivalent to like what we would practice as a tornado drill, and that's twice a year. So there's one done in the fall as well as the spring. And then we would also have schools practice a hold and a secure. Secure is what we're moving to from lockout. The importance of that is to really make sure that the language is very explicit and doesn't get confused with lockdown. And so there's been that intentionality around changing to secure. So those would be other drills. Those would each need to be done twice annually. And then the lockdown drill is done once. We again know the the amount of emotion and frustration that come with a lockdown drill for lots of reasons. And there's always this balance of like, how do we don't want to further impact individuals who have been impacted by trauma. We don't want to cause more harm. And we want to make sure that people know what to do in an emergency. So those are something else that but we're only doing one of those a year. So those all get recorded, Gordon, and then those have to go to the Department of Public Instruction, and they have to go to the Department of Justice for the state of Wisconsin. So we report on all of that.
Thank you. Just to clarify, fire drills would count as an evacuation drill?
Yes.
Okay. Lavinia?
So Memorial High School this year had a lot of unprecedented events. And one of them, the police switched up like the drill that we were supposed to do. It was supposed to be, like a hold or a lockdown. So I'm just wondering, how are you guys, I know this wasn't like your team, but how are you guys maybe eliminating these mistakes in the behind part, since that can cause a lot of issues and stress?
It does cause a lot of issues and stress. I remember I was there with you at Memorial when that happened, and that was awful. And I know how much stress that caused. We are, that is 169% why we are moving to the secure word instead of lock out. And so it used to be lock out and lock down. And the lock out was there's a threat outside the building, and a lockdown is there's a threat inside the building. We are officially moving away from the word lock out and replacing it with secure. That means that we will have the word secure and the word lockdown. So the only time that we would ever hear anything similar to lockdown is in the event of a threat inside the building. And therefore, we're really hopeful and really thinking that this is going to be an opportunity for us to have way less of that confusion with the language. I also now am sitting on the dispatch and Mpd committee around or I'm the liaison from MMSD, which is brand new. We've never been sitting on a meeting that involves both dispatch and the police. For many people who don't know, they're different. So when you call 911, you're not calling MPD, you're calling the dispatch center, and then they're dispatching out to police or to fire or to EMS. And so it's actually 3 different agencies that need to talk to each other when there's incidences. And so we need to be much better about how we communicate. And so I'm looking forward to continuing to be part of that. And I think it'd be great to get youth voice on that as well. But making sure that the dispatch knows what we do in MMSD and what MPD knows that we do, and then also making sure they know how to continue to communicate with each other. So 3 different agencies having to come together, but I'm hopeful that the change in the word is going to be really, really helpful, followed by more intentional, working together.
Thank you for that. Just a quick add-on. I can't remember if you mentioned it in the presentation, but is this language going to be taught to students again? And will the posters in each classroom be changed?
Yeah, yep. All the posters will be changed, all the language will be changed, and we will be transitioning to the new word. What's really great is that the actions won't change. So there won't be any thing that changes except for the word. So the old term, which I'm trying not to say, so I stopped thinking about it in my head, but the old term will not be there, but the same actions will be there, which is to get inside and then to lock exterior doors, and then business as usual inside, but we're going to keep whatever is going on outside of the building.
Thank you.
Joanna.
Hi, I just had 2 questions. So my first one is that at the end of the year, someone brought an airsoft gun into La Follette, and we weren't put on a hold or any type of, I guess, term thing for safety. And I was just wondering, what are the exact protocols if someone brings a weapon like an airsoft to a school? Do they put you on a hold or anything? Because they didn't even notify teachers about the airsoft being inside of the school or anything. No one knew until, well, the administrators knew, but no one, parents or staff or students didn't know until 6 hours after the fact. So I just wanted to know about that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think what's important to know is that when a situation like that happens, they're always super unique. And so I am more than happy to talk about what happens in general, but sometimes there is really specific information that comes up that determines whether or not you're going to go into a hold versus a secure versus a lockdown. It really can differ based on the information that's being presented. And then I think that the other thing that's important to be thinking about is that it's really important, our job, especially during a critical incident like the one you're talking about, is to balance the rights and the safety of the individual who's in question. So in your case, you're talking about the individual that might have an airsoft gun, right? So how do we balance their rights and their safety with the rights and the safety of the rest of the building? And so that's another thing that we're constantly having to be thinking through, is how do we ensure the confidentiality, the support, and the appropriate response to a situation like that in a way that's not going to basically, we're trying to minimize the threat and not make it worse. So there are some times where we might not share all the information because we don't want a situation to happen where the student is notified that the staff know that they have a weapon, and then they decide to use it or something like that. We'd want to really think through what we would call a threat assessment, is, what is the level of threat? And so, we're, again, really balancing that fine line of how do we minimize the threat and how do we not make it worse, and how do we make sure we're supporting everyone involved, because everyone in the building is our students. And so just as, we are needing to assess what's going on with the student that might have brought the weapon, we also are needing to figure out how can we safely, resolve this situation without harming that student or any of our other students. So with that situation, I believe that you were put on a hold, but you don't think you were, okay. But for the most part, we would hold students in classrooms.
Yeah, and then my second question is that, I guess, how do you guys do any communications items, like sending emails to parents at home or anything like that? Because I remember the last meeting, there were a lot of questions that were related to communications. I think more specifically to the communications department. However, the way that we were getting responses, it seemed like you guys knew more, that it was like for you guys more than the communications department. Like, I don't know if you understand my question, but
I do. Yeah.
basically,
No, and I think
I was
that,
just wondering.
yeah, and I did watch also to get some more information about, exactly what I could help answer. And I think that that is also, we're wanting to make sure that, we get better about communication. So the answer to your question is yes, we work with our school principals to make sure that they get out information to staff and to students and to families. Again, with confidentiality and information sharing, and also not wanting to make the situation worse, we want to be really intentional about how the information gets out, because especially if we send something out to families, it's going to also then go to a lot of other places, and we want to make sure it's as factual as it can be, but that it's also timely, right? So we have to balance that. It needs to go out as quick as it can, but we don't want to share anything that's wrong or going to cause more harm. But we definitely do that, and we are wanting to do that as quickly as we can. And I think that we're only that's an area of growth for us. I think the more that we work with our communications team, so our office, as well as where Kristen and Leah are, and then our communications department, those kind of three big offices can continue to really work closely together to think about how do we get communication that's timely, that's accurate, but that also is going to provide support to the students, staff, and families. So what can we do that's actually tangible, like how can you actually get support from this? Because it's one thing to just say, hey, this happened, but it's another thing to say, hey, this happened, and this is what we want to make sure that we want to follow up and support you all on. So yes, absolutely. We want to continue to do that. I think another thing that I learned is another area of growth for us is just making sure, I didn't get to talk about this enough, but it's really another piece of our work in our office is to be thinking about restorative practices. And again, how Leah had mentioned, we are doing it in little places, we're not living it. And I truly feel, and I have Ananda to thank for it. I took her week-long class way back in the day, changed my life. But that restorative practices is not just, responding after an incident. Restorative practices is like starting with how am I going to what is going to be the impact of this situation? Who's going to be impacted? How can I make sure that I can work with everyone involved? How are we going to, whenever possible, avoid those disciplinary consequences, those exclusionary practices? Like, how can we do things as restorative as possible? How are we going to handle this incident while also repairing harm? And so I think coming into critical response incidents like that and having that mindset is really, really crucial too.
Thank you so much for answering my questions.
You're welcome.
Ananda.
Actually, Megan, go ahead.
Thank you. So one of the things that kind of keeps getting brought up is the importance of the drills, but also how they can kind of be trauma inducing and really stressful for a lot of students. And you may have mentioned this and it may have just slipped past me, but could you please elaborate a little bit more on what mental health services may be available to students and faculty after the drill, whether that's like having extra staff brought in or something?
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. And I didn't go specifically into that. So thank you so much for lifting that. I think that's another thing that we are looking forward to improving with the fact that we haven't done drills in 2 years around lockdown. So our office is going to be working really closely with the Office of Student and Staff Support to be thinking about what each school is going to need after the drill. So that would be making sure that we have options for students to talk with student services staff immediately after the drill. We have circle scripts around how to process after doing the drill. So making sure that we have enough people in spaces to do that, making sure we're not doing all the drills across the district on the same day. So it really can utilize resources appropriately so we can get our student services staff to be in spaces, to be working with kids and with staff to process after the situation kind of unfolds. I think also the option to opt out, it's going to be a option, for everyone is going to get the lesson. So you will get the lesson as a with your classroom teacher. So if the decision is made by your family to not participate in the drill itself, then we want to honor that as well, because we want to make sure that that we're, again, really balancing how impactful these types of things are for everyone. But yeah, to answer your question, definitely involving our student services staff, definitely using practices like sitting in circle to debrief or to talk through what happened after the drill.
And I think families can be really key too, right? Like some of the processing can and should happen at schools, but that's also just a great opportunity for families to have some conversation as well. So how do we make sure our families have what they need to talk to their students, as things might, come up?
Thank you so much.
Should I go, Gordon?
Yes.
Thank you. I just want to say, when adults give young people an opportunity to ask questions and share their perspectives, 99% of the time they do a much better job than we do. Second, thank you so much, everyone that presented tonight. It was very, very informative. I wanted to honor our time because we are way past the time that we usually wrap our meetings. And I wanted to bring up a couple of things that I have heard throughout our meetings, Gina, and then if you can kind of do like a sort of a lightning rod on round on those themes. And then definitely I think we need to have you and perhaps Cedric to come back where we can continue to ask. I want us to give members an opportunity to ask additional questions, but also to be able to inform the way that you are shaping the work for next year. I think that has been something, a vision, part of the vision for this committee. So, and Megan, I really appreciate your question. I mean, I appreciate everyone's questions, but Megan, something that you said was something that was coming up for me and came up on previous meetings around the impact on students' mental health after an incident at MMSD and across the country. And I wanted to speak with, with experience of having being a mother of a former MMSD student, seen and experienced and being impacted by our low bar in communication. And I know you spoke to this, Gina, around like the growth area in general, and we wanted to be part of that growth, right? Like part of this committee is to inform that growth versus just, the critiques. But it sounds like, it's personal experience. In particular to, I think Lavinia, you spoke to, or Joanna, you spoke to like something's happening and folks don't know. Jessica, you spoke to, this is your workplace and you don't know what's going on or what's happening. So some opportunity for real-time communication to students and staff that is sensitive, but accurate, but also, centering dignity of people's lives and their mental health. And that both for things happening in MMSD and also things that are happening outside of MMSD and just overall communication improvement, and also a feedback loop. So what does it look like to come back real time, 24, 36, or 72 hours after XYZ happened at the school, and then also follow up, a couple months later, how can we have done better? And I know MMSD has a lot of those systems of improvement internally. I honestly don't think that we have a good mechanism to include youth, in particular youth's voice. And I would say that maybe like a lot of staff gets missed out of this improvement or feedback loop conversation. So I know that was a lot, Gina, and I'm sorry, but I want to see how would you like to wrap up the, given what I have shared, and then whenever you're done, we can pass to Gordon for us to close our meeting.
Yeah, thank you. I heard, that the idea of really being intentional about following up after incidents, especially when people feel like they haven't been given all the information or don't, know something, or they've heard something on the news and had no idea what was happening in their building, and that's not okay. So how are we really coming together in multiple ways, and not just, the principal and the student services team coming together to debrief, but how are we actually involving all of our staff, all of our students, our teachers? How are we bringing different groups of people together to talk through what was that impact on you, and what do you need for us to do it differently the next time? I think that's something really important. I heard that too, with this idea of really having this committee inform our work. I'm super grateful for that. I think that is an opportunity for this wonderful group of people to come together and say, this is how we've been impacted. This is what we'd like to see differently. How can we work together to make that happen? So I think, I'm just thinking, really, really important that we are being intentional about that, repairing that harm that's been caused, really assessing that level of impact, really thinking about it, from a equitable lens as well. Like, how is that impacting different people differently, especially our students of color, our staff of color. And then I think just really continuing to utilize you all to inform that work moving forward. So continuing to get feedback around that, because we definitely have, I think what's good is that we have the process in place, and it just needs to continue to be tweaked, and it can be tweaked by having lots of different, like what I talked about earlier with that multidisciplinary kind of group coming together. So I'm just grateful for you all to be informing that work.
Thank you. Thank you, Gina. Thank you all for being here today and contributing to this wonderful discussion. I believe it's best to move into an adjournment. So I move to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
All those in favor say aye or use the raise hand function.
Aye.
All right. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. McGregory. Thank you all. I thought that was, even though it was.
Sorry, 1 second. We're